When I transmigrated into the true wealthy daughter who was disliked by everyone, the story was already coming to an end. The fake wealthy daughter, who was the darling of the group, had won the affection of everyone. I was the only one who was driven out onto the streets, living a down and out and wandering life, still clutching half of a lymph meat pancake that I had left uneaten in my hand. With such a tragic script, I had not the slightest desire to survive. I looked up at the blue sky. My expression serene and relaxed. I planned to give up and follow the original host, just as I was elegantly and nobly choosing which was more decent, a car accident or jumping off a building. A group of passing robbers dragged me into their car. They pulled out a sharp dagger and pressed it against my throat, giving a ferocious smile. "Don't move, this is a robbery. Hurry up and call your family to send 5 million in ransom. If you dare to shout, I'll send you to hell with one stab." Sure enough, heaven has its own plan. I nodded with a gratified smile, threw away the pancake, and opened my mouth to shout at the top of my voice, "Help!" The shrill voice pierced the eardrums, causing the two robbers to be stunned on the spot. One of them quickly reached out and covered my mouth, blocking all the sounds back into my throat, and said fiercely, "Do you believe that I'll kill you right now?" I shook my head vigorously, blinked my eyes full of expectation, and struggled to choke out, "No, believe, you, kill, for, me, to, see." Unexpectedly, the robbers had no intention of proving it to me. Instead, they took out my phone from my pocket. After unlocking it against my face that showed a determination to face death, they swiped their thumbs and dialed the number of the most recent contact, William. After a long and anxious wait, the phone was finally answered just 1 second before it automatically hung up, before the robber could speak. William's voice full of loathing resounded in the narrow van. "Judy, can you stop being so persistent and annoying? How many times have I told you that I will never recognize you as my sister in this life?" The last sentence was shouted with great force. The robber was taken aback for a moment and was obviously intimidated by the other party's imposing manner, but out of professional ethics, he still roared menacingly, "Your sister is in our hands now. If you can't come up with 5 million, I'll kill the hostage." William sneered. "Judy, is this the new idea you came up with, pretending to be kidnapped to gain my sympathy? I advise you to stop before it's too late and stop challenging my patience again and again. What else can you do besides being jealous and framing Lucy? You can kill the hostage if you want. I won't pay a single penny." On the other end of the phone, there was a delicate and weak female voice coaxing softly, "Brother, Sister Judy just wants everyone to care more about her, so she planned this kidnapping. Why don't we go and take a look? It's very dangerous for Sister Judy, a girl, to be out alone." "Lucy, you're just too kind. A person like her who values her life so much only thinks about how to extort more money from the Wilson family every day. How could she be kidnapped? This is just a clumsy play she directed and acted out herself." After that, the phone was abruptly hung up. The carriage fell into silence. After a while, one of the robbers asked the other, "Didn't they say that Judy is the real young lady of the Wilson family?" Judging from the reaction of the Wilson family members, why do they seem to like that imposter more? The two of them looked at me and sized me up from head to toe. My gaze was heavy, and I couldn't help but open my mouth to remind them to respect their profession. "What are you looking at me for? Hurry up and kill the hostage. There are still 30 minutes until the sun sets. If you don't kill me, are you going to spend an extra $20 to buy me dinner?" As long as they killed the hostage, I could get rid of this new identity of the person disliked by everyone. Although I felt sorry for the original host whose whereabouts were unknown, I didn't want to live in this world at all. Before transmigrating, I was a 9-to-5 office worker. I had no parents, no family, and no friends or girlfriends. All I had was the lonely walk between 2 points every day and the confusion and boredom about the future, until one day when I was crossing the road, I was hit and flown away by a car that ran a red light. At that moment, my heart was unexpectedly extremely calm, as if a faint ray of light shone through the darkness, taking me away from this suffocating life and relieving the stuffy feeling in my heart that was constantly soaked in the sea. Unexpectedly, when I opened my eyes again, I was faced with a hell-level start. At the same time, in my mind, there was a book standing quietly, telling me that I had transmigrated into the true wealthy daughter who was disliked by everyone in a story about the true and fake wealthy daughters. A true wealthy daughter who was switched at birth by the nanny. After 18 years of a miserable life in the orphanage, she finally found her biological parents, unfortunately. The fake wealthy daughter had occupied her place and had already won the hearts of everyone. The true wealthy daughter who had only returned after being missing for 18 years was far less dazzling than the beloved fake wealthy daughter. A swan that has lived among crows for a long time will have its feathers stained with dirty black, which can never be washed away, and a crow that has fallen into a group of swans, under the cultivation of everyone day after day, actually spreads its white wings and blends in with the surrounding swans. After being disliked by everyone for being vulgar and not presentable, the true wealthy daughter who was of no value was driven out of the house and ended up on the streets. Everyone turned around and continued to gather around the noble and elegant fake wealthy daughter, admiring her bright and beautiful feathers. At the end of the book, there was only such a light description. Judy, who had been trying so hard to gain everyone's attention, was finally kicked out of the Wilson family. She wandered on the streets penniless and finally died at the hands of the robbers who didn't receive the ransom. Seeing this, I cast an expectant look at the two robbers in front of me. After I proposed the request to kill the hostage, the carriage fell into an eerie silence again. The two robbers with crew cuts put their heads together and whispered for a long time. However, they made a decision that was completely different from the original plot. They decided not to kill the hostage but to rob a gold store first to make some quick money. The younger robber asked worriedly, "Brother, didn't we agree to only extort the ransom?" Suddenly changing to robbing, "I'm afraid we're not proficient in this business." The older brother looked at him with a look of disappointment. "It's all about getting money, what's the difference?" "Just right, we can use the person we caught as a hostage. We'll rob the gold and then run away." A worried voice sounded, "What if we can't escape?" "Don't worry, I've inquired. The food in the detention center in City B is better than that in other places. I guarantee that you can have greasy food at every meal. It's not in vain that I brought you here all the way by plane." The younger man with a crew cut nodded gratifiedly. Facing my face that showed a complete lack of will to live, he threatened sternly, "Be honest later. If you cooperate with us as a hostage and help with the robbery, we'll let you go later. Can you fulfill a small wish of mine?" "Speak." I didn't want to follow any additional plot at all. At the end of the book, there was no more description of me. I held out a sincere heart and said earnestly, "Considering that I'm working hard as a hostage for you, after you rob the store, can you give me a stab and send me to my death?" The robbery of the gold store went very smoothly. The two robbers divided the work orderly. One of them took a sledgehammer and smashed it hard at the glass. The other was pulling and tugging with me while holding a knife. "The knife is mine. Let go, brother. You just need to move your hand and slash at my neck. Then everything will be fine. It won't take you too much time. Get lost." I still understand the difference between robbing and killing. Don't try to trick me into going to prison for a longer time. Countless pedestrians beside us were gathered in a circle, chatting and pointing enthusiastically. What a primitive way of robbing. That explosion-proof glass is not easy to smash. Look how tired the robber is. After all this time, he hasn't broken a single piece of glass. Welcome, new babies in the live broadcast room. Today, I'll broadcast a live robbery of a store for you, everyone. Please give a little attention with your hands. Let's make our live broadcast room popular. Thank you to the #1 contributor, William Wilson, for sending the flying through the clouds arrow. Now, I'll answer the question from the #1 contributor. Our live broadcast location is at the intersection of South Street. In addition to me, there was also a young girl in the gold store who didn't manage to escape in time. Wearing expensive luxury clothes, she, who was used to a life of ease and comfort, crouched aside tremblingly, looking at me and the kidnapper competing for the knife in horror. There was fear in her eyes, as well as admiration. Crystal tears welled up in her eyes. As the sound of the police sirens got closer and closer, the robber who had been smashing the glass for a long time but still hadn't broken it became furious. He took out a switchblade from his pocket, swept his fierce gaze around, grabbed the young girl who was crouching on the ground, and roared viciously, "Even if I have to go to jail, I'll take someone down with me today." The sharp switchblade made the girl turn even paler, which was in sharp contrast to my excitement. The plot I had been looking forward to finally came, although it was a bit late. If I could die quickly, I could also save the dinner money for tonight. Goodbye, the original host. If I could catch up with the original host on the road to the underworld, maybe the two of us could catch up on old times. the switchblade was raised high. In the midst of everyone's screams, I quickly rushed in front of the young girl and shielded her behind me with a determination to face death. Screams rang out one after another. I felt a cold blade pierce my abdomen, and warm and sticky blood slowly flowed out. The blood loss brought bursts of dizziness, just like the moment when I was hit and killed by a car in the original world. A familiar sense of relief washed over me, making me feel inexplicably at ease. All the colors in the world suddenly disappeared, and the scenery in front of me shattered into countless sharp fragments. I closed my eyes and showed a relieved smile, and couldn't help but let out a long sigh. I'm finally going to die. My body slowly went limp. Amid the girl's loud sobs with tears all over her face, I closed my eyes in a daze. In the last second before I completely lost consciousness, I seemed to see a young man anxiously pushing through the crowd, his panicked face full of fear. He held my soft and powerless body in his arms and roared like a madman. "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and call an ambulance." Judging from his eyebrows and eyes that were 5 points similar to mine, this person should be William, as described in the book, the biological brother of the original host. But William would definitely not show a worried look towards me. According to the description in the book, ever since the original host recognized her family and returned to the Wilson family, the person who disliked the original host the most in the whole family was him. On the day the original host returned to the Wilson family, Lucy, who had occupied the original host's identity for 18 years, ran away from home overnight. After being searched for all night by the family and brought back, she, who was soaked all over from the rain, was like a frightened little deer, wrapped in wet clothes. She hid in everyone's arms and cried, "Mom, Dad, brother, I thought you didn't want me anymore." William lovingly held the person in his arms and turned his head to roar at the original host fiercely. "It's all your fault, a country bumpkin. Don't think that just because you have a blood relationship with me, you can take Lucy's place in the Wilson family. I'm telling you, blood relationship can never compare to 18 years of being together day and night." At that time, the original host was wearing a cheap short-sleeved t-shirt, with a simple package at her feet, standing in the magnificent living room of the Wilson family. She was shivering all over from the air conditioning, and no one even gave her a proper look. With such an image of a country person who didn't fit in with the wealthy family, it was natural that she would be despised by the upper class. They all hated the original host for suddenly appearing and breaking the peace and tranquility that the Wilson family had always enjoyed. From that day on, the original host began a year-long period of humble flattery, just to regain the long-lost family affection of the Wilson family. But all she got in return was their contempt in their eyes and the evaluation of the original host, embarrassing and not able to hold up the family's reputation, until finally, after the original host framed the innocent and simple fake wealthy daughter, Lucy, several times, she was finally driven out of the Wilson family, alone and with nothing left. It was my turn to accept this tragic fate. Now, the original host didn't want to walk on this road that had lost all its colors. I didn't want to stay here for even a minute longer. There was a strong smell of disinfectant filling my nostrils. I struggled to open my eyes. When I tilted my head, I saw William's slightly worried eyebrows and eyes. The excessive medical treatment had turned my attempt to seek death into an effort to survive. I finally met the robbers, but the knife missed and avoided all my internal organs, and I only suffered a minor flesh wound. If I want to escape from this world by faking my death, I have to find another way. In the original plot, Judy died at the hands of the robbers who didn't receive the ransom, but I don't know where the deviation occurred. I clearly fell into the hands of the robbers too, but I'm still alive and well. Was it because I didn't cooperate well enough, or was it that my determination to seek death wasn't obvious enough? The vitality of life made me feel irritable, and William's voice beside me was even more annoying. "Judy, if you hadn't always deliberately gotten injured to gain everyone's attention, I wouldn't have saved you even if I saw you in danger," I retorted angrily. "Shut up." The original host was submissive and tried to please him, but I won't. Lying in the soft hospital bed, there was something poking me in the neck, making me uncomfortable. I reached out and pulled it, and found that it was a worn-out safety amulet. The outer skin was frayed, and the dark red silk cloth had faded. There was something hard inside. I didn't have the memories of the original host. I just thought this shabby thing was in the way. I pulled it off and threw it away casually, creating a perfect parabola in the air. All the words that William wanted to say were suddenly swallowed back. The small safety amulet lay quietly on the ground, making his facial muscles twitch. His eyes stared fixedly at my face. He gritted his teeth and said, "Judy, you just threw away this safety amulet, otherwise, what?" I looked up in confusion. It was so uncomfortable to be poked by it. Why not throw it away? I'm already so miserable. I was dragged into this strange world for no reason and became someone disliked by everyone. Don't I even have the right to throw away a safety amulet? I don't even want my life. Why would I care about a faded safety amulet? William's voice became more and more irritated, and his voice suddenly rose. "Judy, do you still remember how this safety amulet came about?" I lifted my eyelids and said calmly, "I don't remember." A thick book stood in my mind. I didn't have so much leisure to flip through it carefully. I just roughly scanned the plot and knew the world I was in and the original host's experience. As for that safety amulet, there were countless words in the book. Maybe it was mentioned in passing, but it didn't leave the slightest impression in my mind at all. William's anger surged, and a thin layer of annoyance was clearly visible on his face. He stood up and stared at my indifferent eyebrows and eyes, trying to find a trace of deliberate acting on my face, but my extremely calm expression told him that I really didn't remember. He kicked the safety amulet away irritably and sneered a few words. "Judy, your acting skills are getting more and more superb. I think those robbers were also found by you to act, right? The purpose was to attract our attention so that you could return to the Wilson family again. Now it seems that it was fortunate that Lucy was left behind 18 years ago. Not you who are full of calculations." No matter how hurtful William's words were, they couldn't stir up any emotional waves in me. After all, I have no intention of staying in this world. I ignored William's presence and took a look around the hospital room. The hospital room was on the 18th floor, which was an extremely auspicious number. The window could be opened wide enough to allow me to pass through freely. "I'm sorry, doctors and nurses, I've wasted your precious medical time." The sunset glow filled the sky outside the window, with scattered red clouds. "It's better to choose today than another day." Pressing on my wound, I slowly moved to the windowsill. William stood there with his arms crossed, looking at my struggling figure as I took steps. He sneered again. "What, are you going to perform some bitter trick next, in order to covet the money of the Wilson family? You really stop at nothing." Before his sarcastic words were finished, they suddenly turned into fear on his face. In William's dilated pupils, I took a deep breath. My expression suddenly relaxed, closed my eyes, and quickly climbed over the window and jumped down. The light feeling of falling suddenly stopped. There was a pulling pain in the muscles of my arm. I opened my eyes unhappily and looked up. I saw William, whose face was red, struggling to hold my arm. There was great panic and fear on his face. His eyes were blood red, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. I tried hard to break free from William's grip. "Let go." William's fingers tightened a little more, and his voice was obviously trembling. "Judy, I won't let go. I was wrong before. Don't move around. I will definitely pull you back up." I don't know where he got the strength from. Gritting his teeth, he forcefully dragged me, a person weighing over 100 pounds, back into the hospital room from the window. My arm was almost dislocated from being dragged. When we fell to the ground in a sorry state, William hugged me tightly in his arms with lingering fear. The feeling of surviving made him tremble all over. He held me with great force and kept roaring, "Are you crazy? This is the 18th floor. If I hadn't been quick-eyed and grabbed you in time, you would have been smashed into a pile of blurred flesh and blood today." After saying that, as if remembering something, his lips instantly turned pale. He stared at my indifferent face, his lips trembling. "Judy, I thought you were just acting on purpose to get our attention. You actually really wanted to commit suicide." Fear made him a bit incoherent. I looked at him in confusion. William has disliked the original host for more than a day or two. If I died, he should be happy. Why would there be such a regretful expression on his face? Before I could figure it out, after all the commotion, the wound that hadn't healed yet burst open again. Blood slowly seeped out, forming patches of red like plum blossoms. The world gradually became blurred. I rolled my eyes and fainted completely. When I woke up again, I was in the Wilson family's villa. It was a spacious and bright bedroom, but it wasn't the room the original host had lived in. Although I didn't have the memories of the original host, I had found it in the original plot. The room the original host lived in was a cramped one. the same size as Lucy's cloakroom. It was originally equipped for the Wilson family's nanny. After the true wealthy daughter, who was disliked by everyone, returned, that small bedroom became her habitat. There was not the slightest bit of the belated compensation for family affection. Instead, she received a lot of disdainful and annoyed looks. After the hustle and bustle ended and night fell, I clearly heard William's voice arguing forcefully in the living room. "Judy really doesn't want to live anymore. She almost died twice in front of me today," Mr. Wilson's majestic voice sounded. "Although Judy is my biological daughter, when I first saw her, I knew she had a lot of bad qualities and had already been spoiled. She came to Wilson family on her own initiative. Isn't it just for the money of our Wilson family? What about committing suicide? It's just a show she put on to ask for more money." Mr. Wilson was right. It was indeed the original host who took the initiative to come and claim kinship. She had a face that was 9 points similar to Mrs. Wilson's. By chance, she caught a glimpse of her biological mother's appearance on TV and was immediately stunned. Those eyebrows and bone structure were exactly the same as the original host's. The original host, who had been an orphan for 18 years, immediately decided to take a chance and claim kinship. As for asking for money, the original host was just a senior high school student when she claimed kinship. How could she support herself without money? Mr. and Mrs. Wilson of the Wilson family grew up in a wealthy environment. They were picked up and sent by car whenever they went out. The hundreds of thousands of dollars in dividends they received every month arrived more punctually than the original host's menstrual period. Who was malnourished? Even William and Lucy had a monthly allowance of $50,000. In addition, all the luxury goods they bought were paid for with Mr. Wilson's black card. Only the original host had to earn the $1 bus fare by herself whenever she went out. On the first day she came to the Wilson family, the original host opened her mouth and asked Mr. Wilson for $10,000. This money was used to pay for her high school tuition and half a semester's living expenses. But what she got was a mocking from her biological father. "Can't you pretend anymore on the first day? Are you in such a hurry to ask for money from me?" Finally, he threw $10,000 down condescendingly and didn't forget to say contemptuously, "You stink of money." It was really a correct choice for the nanny to swap the children 18 years ago. Just listen. How heartbroken the original host must have been when she heard these words. Fortunately, I'm not the original host. In the living room, the muscles on William's sharply contoured face trembled, and he roared in a loud voice, "Dad, Judy really isn't pretending. It's the 18th floor. If I hadn't been quick-eyed and grabbed her, she would have been completely smashed into minced meat. If she hadn't suffered great grievances, how could a person have the courage to jump off the 18th floor?" Even now, his hands were still trembling slightly. Remembering that heart-wrenching scene, his face turned pale. Shock was written all over everyone's faces. The annoyance on the faces of the Wilson family couple turned into disbelief. I awkwardly pushed open the door and inappropriately interjected, "Excuse me, can I leave now?" Everyone was even more surprised. After all, they had seen too much of my humble and timid appearance when I tried so hard to stay in the Wilson family but ended up making things worse, suddenly seeing that I had no desires or demands for everyone. They were a bit unaccustomed to it for a while. I'm not the original host, and I don't have any expectations of the family affection of this family at all. Silence filled the living room. Lucy, who was sitting next to Mrs. Wilson, rolled her eyes and showed a sad look. She lowered her head and whimpered, "This is originally Sister's home. Sister should stay. The one who should leave is me. The marriage alliance with the James family should also be Sister's." These words indirectly reminded Mr. and Mrs. Wilson of something. They immediately reacted, and the loosening on their faces turned back into ice. Mrs. Wilson lovingly hugged Lucy, who she had raised for 18 years, in her arms, turning her face, which was extremely similar to mine. She said in disgust, "To compete for Lucy's position, your acting skills are really getting more and more superb. After all, isn't it just to marry that kid from the James family, since you came back to claim kinship? You framed Lucy everywhere and desperately tried to drive Lucy out. Our once peaceful home has been disrupted by you and hasn't had a single peaceful day." I turned a deaf ear and remained calm. My eyes didn't stay on this group of people for a moment. I just walked past them and prepared to leave. William quickly followed and grabbed my arm. His strength was so great that it hurt me a bit. "Judy, I don't believe you're such a person. I believe you. I don't need his trust. I only know that staying here will delay my plan to fake my death and escape, but William was tough in his attitude. In the face of Lucy's resentful gaze, he insisted that I stay in the Wilson family. He was afraid that something unexpected would happen to me again. When I set foot in the Wilson family again, my treatment was a little better than that of the original host. I was moved from the nanny's room on the first floor to the guest room on the second floor, at the same time. Everyone in the Wilson family noticed that something was wrong with me. When I lived in the Wilson family in the past, I would get up early every morning to make delicious breakfast for Mr. and Mrs. Wilson. They would eat the breakfast clean with extremely picky eyes and then turn around and praise that Lucy's hands were meant for playing the violin. I never had to do these meaningless things. After I came, I never entered the kitchen again. The next day, I slept until late in the morning. The wound on my abdomen hardly hurt anymore. When I got up and went downstairs, Mrs. Wilson's dissatisfied voice came from the living room. "Getting up so late, you have no manners at all." Lucy covered her mouth and kindly tried to persuade. "Mom, sister was injured yesterday." I think the injury is probably faked. In the past, she was best at getting injured to gain our attention. "Judy, go to the kitchen and make me some breakfast." Mrs. Wilson had damaged her stomach from drinking and doing business with Mr. Wilson in the early years, so she had extremely high requirements for food. According to the original plot, after Judy came to the Wilson family, she would cook personally every day and make the stomach-nourishing food that Mrs. Wilson liked. It was cumbersome and tiring, and her hands were often burned. My cold gaze swept over Mrs. Wilson, and I said indifferently, "Mrs. Wilson, I'm not here to apply for the job of a nanny. If you need me to cook, please pay me according to the market price first." Lucy stood up for Mrs. Wilson. "Sister, how can you talk to Mom like that?" I stared at her gloating eyes and calmly stated the fact. "That's your mom, not mine." Mrs. Wilson stood there in a daze. What shocked her was not that I didn't want to cook, but that I didn't call her mom anymore. You know, even when the original host was driven out of the Wilson family for targeting Lucy, she still cried out and called her mom. Now, those heartfelt moms full of expectation had been replaced by the cold and emotionless Mrs. Wilson. I went to the dining room alone and casually picked up the cold bread and milk on the table and stuffed them into my stomach. As a working person, I'm never picky about food. The goal of eating is just to fill my stomach. Seeing that I didn't crowd around Mrs. Wilson as usual, Lucy fully demonstrated her lotus-white tea nature. She came up to me and said timidly, "Sister, I know you like Simon, but I'm going to get engaged to Simon in a few days. I hope sister won't be sad." After saying that, she stared into my eyes, expecting that I would fly into a rage and ask her why she was snatching something that belonged to me. Then she could logically play the pitiful card in front of Mrs. Wilson and make Mrs. Wilson think that I was a more vicious person. But after hearing this, my eyes lit up. Now that I'm living in the Wilson family, William is like a surveillance camera without any blind spots, watching my every move, for fear that I might try to commit suicide again. Even if I stay in the bathroom for one more minute, he can knock on the door outside so loudly that it shakes the sky. On the day of Lucy's engagement to Simon, there will be a lot of guests, and they will be too busy to pay attention to me. Isn't it the best opportunity for me to leave this world? As for liking that Simon, I sneered. In my blank mind, I don't even know what Simon looks like. How could I possibly love him? The marriage alliance between the Wilson family and the James family was put on the agenda more than 10 years ago, as soon as Lucy turned 18. The two families would officially form the alliance. At the luxurious engagement banquet, Lucy, wearing a high-end custom-made dress, stood in the center of the stage. The spotlight shone on her, and all the envious eyes focused on her. She played the violin like a dream, and the notes flowed. I sat in the corner and suddenly understood why the original host was unwilling to accept the situation. Growing up in a honeypot, with so much pocket money that it could never be spent up, and with her parents investing countless amounts of money and a great deal of energy, the delicate flower raised in the greenhouse had been cultivated into the dazzling appearance she had now, receiving everyone's envious glances. All of this should have belonged to the original host. Her princess-like wonderful life had been replaced by hunger and beatings in the orphanage, when Lucy was acting coquettishly and nestling in her parents' arms, asking for a new bag worth over $100,000, the original host was fighting with others until her head was broken for a piece of candy worth 50 cents. after going through hardships to claim kinship and return home, she was disliked by her parents for being vulgar. In the wealthy family that valued interests above all else, she had no value at all and was despised by everyone. The most infuriating thing was that the nanny who had swapped the children had already died, leaving behind the misplaced lives of the two children, with no chance to correct them. When the piece of music ended, Lucy smiled sweetly and came up to me, her eyes full of expectation. "Sister, how well did I play the violin?" I wiped the cake crumbs from the corner of my mouth and nodded seriously. "You played very well, but I can't appreciate such refined things. If you could perform a pole dance, I would think it's even better." Lucy's false innocent appearance almost couldn't be maintained. She leaned close to my ear and gritted her teeth. "Sister, you came back too late. In this circle, even your own parents won't like a daughter who has no value at all. Do you understand?" What she said made a lot of sense. I'm worthless to the Wilson family. The whispers of the people around me kept drilling into my ears, and they didn't mean to avoid me at all. That's the biological daughter of the Wilson family, right? So rustic. I heard she grew up in an orphanage. She couldn't wait to ask for money on the first day she came back to claim kinship. Tsk. After more than 10 years outside, she's already been spoiled. If I were the Wilson family, I wouldn't recognize such a shameful daughter either. They were right, the Wilson family had never liked me. The son was used to inherit the family business, and the daughter was used to amaze everyone and strengthen the family's power through marriage. I have no value in either case, but at the same time, the unfamiliar Wilson family means nothing to me either. At the engagement banquet where everyone was holding champagne flutes and flattering each other, taking advantage of no one's notice, I quietly slipped out through the back door. Standing on the high rooftop, a gentle wind blew towards me, making me feel relaxed and comfortable. Just thinking that I could get away from this strange world, the stuffiness in my heart dissipated a lot. Although I would disrupt this perfect engagement banquet later, but I guess no one would mind this little accident. Maybe everyone would even cheer for the departure of the person disliked by everyone, me. I spread my arms and took a deep breath of the rich fragrance of roses. The corners of my lips curved into a perfect arc. Just as I was about to climb over the railing and have another intimate contact with the ground, a terrified shout came from behind me. "Judy, don't do anything stupid." I stopped in my tracks. It was William again, like a lingering ghost. His eyes were bloodshot. He stretched out his arms and moved towards me little by little. The worry on his face was so intense that it almost blinded me. "Judy, be good, listen to your brother. It's dangerous on the rooftop. Can you come down first?" When he said this, he stared closely at my actions, while also not daring to provoke me. He was like a poor dog, humbly begging me to be obedient. I frowned and stared at his actions. Even from a distance, I could see his body trembling slightly under his suit. For a moment, I seemed to really feel the kind of nervousness and worry that an elder brother has for his younger sister. Didn't William always dislike me the most? Why does he seem to be possessed today? I took another step forward, with half of my body leaning out of the rooftop. William panicked and shouted, "Judy, don't do anything stupid. It was my fault in the past. As long as you come down, I'll promise you whatever you want to do." His expression didn't seem to be fake. His eyes were blood red, and his carefully groomed hair was also messed up by the wind. Behind William, however, there came an ill-timed sneer. "Judy, you really stop at nothing to disrupt this engagement banquet." I followed the sound and saw Simon, who was wearing a neat suit today, appear in front of me. He was the Simon that the original host liked. During my leisure time, I glanced at the original plot. When the original host first returned to the Wilson family, under the premise that everyone disliked her, she met Simon. He was a wealthy young master, handsome and considerate. He was simply a ray of light illuminating the original host's barren life. In addition, with the marriage alliance between the Wilson family and the James family, if there hadn't been the wrong swap back then, the person Simon should have married would have been Judy. The girl who came out of the orphanage, without a doubt, fell into a beautiful dream she wove for herself. She fantasized that the ugly duckling could meet her Prince Charming, who would save her from the depths of suffering and make her a princess in a fairy tale. Unfortunately, the person the James family wanted to marry was never the real wealthy daughter. It was a girl from a prominent family who could bring honor to the family. Lucy, who was tailor-made for the wealthy family, was the best choice for the James family. How could Judy, who had nothing, catch Simon's eye? So, As soon as this ray of light learned that the real wealthy daughter was not liked by the Wilson family, it immediately shifted to illuminate someone else. This was destined to be a love like a moth to a flame, a harsh reality that Judy would crash into with all her might. Simon hated me extremely. After catching a glimpse of my shaky figure hanging by the rooftop, he sneered and said, "Judy, you only deserve to threaten me with death. No matter how persistently you pester me, there will always be only Lucy in my heart." After hearing Simon's grand words, William couldn't help but punch him in the face and cursed, "Simon, who allowed you to talk about my sister like that?" Simon obviously didn't understand why William, who had always disliked me, suddenly stood on my side and spoke up for me. He turned his disgusted gaze towards me, put his arm around the shaky Lucy, and like a hero protecting his beloved girl, directed all his hostility towards me. "Judy, what are you up to behind the scenes again? Did you say something to William that made him suddenly stand on your side? I'm telling you, Lucy is not only my fiancée but also my savior. I will only like her in my whole life." After these sonorous words were spoken, a clear and beautiful female voice suddenly exclaimed, "Wasn't it Judy who saved you back then?" With this sentence, everyone gathered on the rooftop was thrown into an uproar. Even the flashing spotlights couldn't hide the paleness of Lucy's face, which was as white as snow. The person who shouted was Winnie, the girl I saved in the gold store that day. Unlike that day in the gold store, the timidity and fear in her eyes had disappeared. The look she gave me was only filled with firmness and trust, as well as the unchanging strong concern. Simon was stunned for a moment first. After reacting, he sneered. Even across half of the rooftop, I could feel Simon's deep disgust for me. "Judy, in order to attract my attention, do you even want to claim the credit of being the savior? By all means." Lucy, who was standing beside him, bit her lower lip hard and turned her evasive gaze towards me. "Sister, I know you've always wanted to fit into the Wilson family, and I also know that I've occupied your position for 18 years. But it's a well-known fact that I saved Simon 2 months ago. I know you like Simon. If you want this credit, I'll give it to you." With her pale little face and the words of constant concession, Simon's eyes even turned red. Even William was stunned for a moment and fell into confusion. Winnie rolled her eyes, took out her phone from her small handbag, and after opening it, a video was presented to everyone. In the video, among the scattered car parts that were smashed to pieces, Simon, who was covered in blood, was lying unconscious in the driver's seat. A thin and small figure was struggling to drag the person out of the driver's seat and then urgently called for an ambulance. Although the streetlights in the suburbs were dim, the pixel quality of Winnie's phone was excellent, clearly showing my profile. Even the small mole at the corner of my eye was faintly visible on the screen. In the book, the record of this plot was only in a few words. It told that Simon was distracted while driving in the suburbs and accidentally crashed into the isolation belt, hitting his head on the steering wheel and passing out. In a daze, he felt that he was saved by someone. When he woke up, he found himself in the hospital, and by his side was the girl he liked, Lucy. As a matter of course, he became even more infatuated with his savior, and the engagement date was advanced by a few months. Winnie was still arguing on my behalf. Although I'm not from the Wilson family, I've also heard that Judy is the biological daughter of the Wilson family. She suffered a lot outside for 18 years. It was only a year ago that she finally managed to return home. Not only did she not receive the sincere treatment of all of you, but she was also bullied by you. What kind of grievances must a 19-year-old girl have endured to rush forward without hesitation to block that knife for me with the determination to die on that day in the gold store? She spoke with great indignation. Everyone listened with sighs on their faces. The video taken by Winnie's phone was still playing on a loop. My thin and weak figure, due to long-term malnutrition, tried hard again and again to drag Simon out of the deformed car. Afraid that the gasoline would leak and cause an explosion, I gritted my teeth and dragged him to a safe place. Finally, Winnie stared at Lucy's bloodless face and added in a cold tone, "If I hadn't passed by coincidentally, I'm afraid some people would have really claimed the credit of being the savior." Lucy's face turned deathly pale. She bit her lower lip tightly, and the venom in her eyes was clearly visible. I gave a grateful look to Winnie, although I'm not the original host. But I want to thank her on behalf of the original host. It was the video she casually took when she passed by that gave the original host her innocence. If I can meet the original host on the way to the afterlife, I will definitely tell her this good news. Simon unconsciously let go of the hand that was gripping Lucy tightly. His steps were unsteady, and he stared at my eyebrows and eyes in disbelief. Judy, the person who saved me back then, it was actually you. Simon was slowly approaching me, and the guilt and pain on his face were overflowing. He shakily stretched out his slender hand with distinct knuckles, swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Judy, it's dangerous on the rooftop. You come down first. I promise that I will never misunderstand you again in the future. William also anxiously chimed in beside him. Yes, Judy, you come down first. It's dangerous over there. Be good. Come here quickly. The worry on their faces didn't seem to be fake. For a moment, I felt that the person with the favorite of the group script seemed to be me. But I, the person disliked by everyone, should have been out of the picture long ago. Behind me was the howling cool wind, blowing my hair and slapping it randomly on my face. One by one, the worried faces in front of me gradually enlarged. I couldn't wait any longer. I have no obligation at all to complete the redundant plot of the person disliked by everyone on behalf of the original host. I can't even live my own life well. How could I have the energy to live someone else's life? With a determined heart, amidst a chorus of screams, I resolutely climbed over the rooftop, spread my arms, and like a butterfly with broken wings, I plunged down rapidly in the most graceful posture. The stars in the sky were reflected in my eyes. Before passing the rooftop, I saw Simon, who was the closest to me. The worried expression on his face instantly turned into fear. He rushed towards me like a madman, but only managed to touch the corner of my fluttering skirt. The soft silk cloth slipped through his fingers. Amidst a series of screams, I landed heavily, but I didn't feel the expected pain. I moved my flexible limbs. Under me was something soft. The fifth floor shouldn't have such a result, especially since the floors here are generally higher. In the midst of the commotion, I clearly heard William's voice, full of relief after surviving the danger. Fortunately, I secretly had someone lay out a fire cushion below. No wonder I didn't feel any pain when falling from such a high place. Even the program, Approaching Science, could make an 80-episode series to reveal the mystery. I touched my broken-hearted chest. I tilted my head and fainted completely. The scenery around me changed, and I seemed to have fallen into a bizarre and absurd dream. In this dream, I started to walk alone in a corner of the city again. The world of feasting and revelry was always separated from me by a hazy fog. People around me seemed not to see me and passed by me one after another. I still maintained the life I had before transmigrating, going between 2 points and having very little communication with others. Every day, I opened my emotionless eyes and was alone in the crowded stream of people. Suddenly, a car roared towards me with the engine running. I could have dodged, but I let out a long sigh, which I hadn't done for a long time, and chose to stand still. The ear-piercing sound of brakes rang out. I opened my eyes and found that I was back in the hospital again. I had been in this world for less than a month, and this was the second time I had been hospitalized. This time when I woke up, there were many people gathered around my bed, all with worried expressions. Only when they saw that I was awake did they all heave a sigh of relief. Simon's eyes were red. He tightly grasped my hand, as if afraid that I would leave him again. He choked up and said, "Judy, I wrongly blamed you for many things in the past. Promise me not to do anything stupid again. I know you've always liked me. After you recover, we'll get engaged. I swear that I will only like you in my whole life." I withdrew my hand warily. Like you? When did I ever like you? The one who liked him was the original host. If Simon became a handful of ashes right now, maybe he could catch up with the original host who hadn't had time to be reincarnated. And the two of them could have an unending love story on the bridge of helplessness. I'm just a lonely soul from another world and have no interest at all in this man whom I've only met once. What's more, Simon is really not a good match. On the first day the original host returned to the Wilson family. He was polite and seemed like a refined gentleman when he suddenly appeared. He enthusiastically asked about the original host's preferences, patiently followed behind, and often mentioned the marriage alliance between the Wilson family and the James family. While trying to please her, he closely observed the Wilson family's attitude towards the original host. He couldn't figure out whether the Wilson family cared more about the real wealthy daughter or the fake wealthy daughter who had been cultivated for more than 10 years. The result was obvious. The Wilson family didn't care about the original host. As soon as Simon learned this news, He immediately drew a clear line with the original host and instead continued to fawn over Lucy. The two of them often stood in front of the luxurious Wilson family villa, smiling as they watched the original host being treated like trash by everyone. To me, Simon was like the mud under my feet. Whoever got involved with him would be unlucky. Perhaps the coldness in my eyes was too obvious. Simon shivered slightly, suppressed the unease in his heart, and forced a smile. Judy, how could you not like me? If you didn't like me, why would you have tried so hard to save me? You jumped off the building this time because you were sad that I was going to get engaged, so you did such a crazy thing. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson beside him also wiped their tears and echoed, yes, Judy, after you get better, we'll go and change your name, and then you can happily marry Simon. How could you have the heart to jump off such a high building? Do you know that every time I close my eyes now, all I can see is the scene of you falling from the rooftop? Over the years, it was Mom who ignored you. I watched this group of people perform coldly. The belated family affection and love were like stale steamed buns to me, covered with a layer of disgusting grayish-yellow fluff. Even if I were starving, I wouldn't use them to satisfy my hunger. I pulled the thin quilt over my head and coldly issued an order to send them away. I'm not feeling well, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, and Mr. James. Please leave for now. Through the quilt, I heard Mrs. Wilson's muffled sobbing and William's soft persuasion and pleading beside me. Finally, I only heard a soft murmur from someone, Judy, I'm sorry. After the noisy crowd dispersed, I looked around the hospital room again. This was clearly a VIP hospital room. The window was sealed tightly and couldn't be opened, so they could leave with peace of mind. It was already the early hours of the morning, in the once bustling city during the day. Only the streetlights cast a small patch of dim yellow light. I curled up in the hospital bed and rubbed my heart that always felt stuffy. The heart that beat powerfully seemed to be missing a piece. It made me lose interest in doing anything. Even the simplest things like getting up and washing my face in the morning required me to mentally prepare myself countless times before I could difficultly get up and move my feet. It was as if an invisible hand was tightly clutching my heart, making it hard for me to breathe. I was calculating in my heart how I could avoid this group of people so that I could continue with my plan to escape by faking my death. The door of the hospital room was pushed open forcefully, and a tall and slender figure appeared in front of me. The person who came in was wrapped in a chill. He stepped forward and grabbed my neck, gritting his teeth and saying, Judy, what kind of trick are you playing behind the scenes again? The fingers on my neck tightened even more forcefully. However, an infinite sense of joy welled up in my heart. Press harder, put in more effort. Maybe tonight I could fulfill my dream of escaping by faking my death and get rid of the identity of the person disliked by everyone. Leave this hellish start for the next lucky person. There was a faint smile on the corner of my mouth, and my expression was relaxed. I didn't even struggle and quietly enjoyed the approaching death. The air in my lungs was getting thinner and thinner. In the last second before I was about to lose consciousness, the force on my neck suddenly disappeared. A large amount of air rushed into my lungs, pulling me back to reality. The person who came in seemed extremely angry at my submissive expression and said in a fit of rage, after you disrupted the engagement banquet, Lucy suddenly disappeared, and she even left her broken phone at the wedding banquet. Did you secretly hire someone to kidnap her? Except for you, who has always disliked Lucy, I really can't think of anyone else who would do such a thing. Judy, what kind of bewitching soup did you pour into other people? They actually think you didn't do it. I coughed violently for a long time before I came to my senses. Kidnap? Was this something that a person disliked by everyone, could afford to do? It was so costly. Just yesterday, I checked the balance of the original host's phone. There were only a pitiful $20 left in it. To make matters worse, early this morning, $19 was deducted for the membership renewal, and only $1 was left in the balance. It wasn't even enough to buy a lymph meat pancake. Where would I get the money to hire someone to kidnap someone, as expected? With the plot of being the person disliked by everyone, even when I'm lying in the hospital, the blame can accurately fall on my head. I cleared my throat and looked at the person in front of me, first asking the question that had been in my mind. Who are you? The person's expression suddenly froze. The bright incandescent light in the hospital room shone on his face, and I clearly saw the muscles on his face twitching. Surrounded by the chill, after a long while, he replied awkwardly, Judy. What kind of trick are you playing again? how could you not know me? Of course I didn't know him. There was such a thick book in my mind, with countless names in it. How could I possibly match all the new faces with their names? I knew William because he looked so much like my fraternal twin. I knew Simon because he was getting engaged to Lucy, and the members of the Wilson family had mentioned him to me countless times. As for this person who appeared out of nowhere in front of me, who knew who he was? I casually made up a clumsy excuse. I fell from the rooftop of the James family's engagement banquet and accidentally hit my head. There's something wrong with my memory, and I've forgotten many people from the past. With these few brief explanations, the person took an incredulous step back, and his eyes instantly turned red. He trembled his lips and still couldn't believe it as he asked, "You've forgotten me?" "Yes, I've forgotten all the unimportant people. And that includes you." I didn't know if it was an illusion, but after the word unimportant was spoken, the other person trembled violently. "It's impossible. You and I grew up in the same orphanage. How could you forget me?" Watching him shake his head in pain, the redness in his eyes became even more intense. Only then did I suddenly realize, the person in front of me was Cole, the #1 spare tire suitor of the female lead Lucy in the story of the true and fake wealthy daughters. He was also the childhood sweetheart who grew up with the original host in the same orphanage. Cole was the same age as the original host. The two of them supported each other and stumbled through their childhood in the orphanage until they were 18 years old. After the original host returned to the Wilson family to claim kinship, Cole was happy for her and once went to visit her. Unexpectedly, he met Lucy, who was wearing a white dress and was extremely elegant. It was love at first sight. 18 years of being childhood sweethearts couldn't compare to the forceful intrusion of the graceful figure playing the violin. Cole's heart was completely devoted to Lucy, knowing that his status was humble and he wasn't worthy of the young lady of the Wilson family. He chose to be a suitor and silently protect her behind her back, just so that the girl he loved could be safe and smooth. When I was reading the original plot, the thing that puzzled me the most was why Cole, who had been childhood sweethearts with the original host for 18 years, fell hopelessly in love with Lucy after seeing her just a few times and instead disliked the original host. The moment I saw him, the confusion in my heart suddenly became clear. The original host was like a wild weed, having grown all kinds of thorns in the orphanage. Under the premise of extremely unbalanced resource allocation, she needed to fight every day to get a little food and the opportunity to study. The thin and weak Cole hid behind the original host like this and managed to stumble through high school, now that he was an adult and had the ability to protect himself. As for the original host who had been his crutch for more than 10 years, he naturally discarded her. Lucy, who stood under the spotlight, became the goddess that haunted his dreams and occupied his entire brain filled with hormones. As for the original host, she was compared to a piece of bad-tempered and competitive mud. I gave him an annoyed look. "I told you, I've forgotten all the unimportant people. Not remembering you proves that you must be someone dispensable in my life." Cole left the hospital in a state of despair, and it was rare that he didn't mention the kidnapping of his goddess again. Shortly after he left, I quietly slipped out of the hospital, breathing in the long-awaited fresh air. I slowly walked alone to the bridge near the hospital. Standing on the high place and looking down, the turbulent river water rolled and rushed. I had been lingering in this strange world for a month, and it was time for me to leave. Although the time for my escape by faking my death was a bit late, it was highly likely that I wouldn't meet the original host on the bridge of helplessness, but I still raised a smile, stared at the churning river surface, and was just about to turn over and plunge into the surging river. A strong and powerful hand from behind suddenly wrapped around me, and a wet cotton cloth covered my mouth and nose. The pungent smell entered my nostrils, and in just a moment, I lost all my strength to struggle. Before my consciousness completely dissipated, I couldn't help but complain in my heart, "My life is really tougher than a concrete pile." When I woke up groggily again, I heard the sound of the waves crashing. The salty and fishy sea breeze, carrying a thick layer of water vapor, lingered around me. I slowly opened my eyes and found myself lying on a reef by the sea. Standing there with a smug expression, looking down at me, was actually Lucy. There was a hint of ferocity on her face, completely different from her usual innocent appearance. The sky was turning a pale white, and the rising sun was about to break through the darkness before dawn. Lucy seemed to hate me extremely, and the venom in her eyes was clearly visible. Judy, you've been gone for 18 years. Why did you have to come back and shake my position? Now everyone in the Wilson family is standing by your side. I pretended to be kidnapped and left evidence to prove that you did it. Except for Cole, no one actually believed it. The more she spoke, the angrier she became. Her former status as the darling of the group had fallen apart at an extremely fast speed since I transmigrated here. After a moment, Lucy calmed down and leaned close to my ear, whispering softly, Judy, I'm going to let you know today that if we're in danger, the person they choose will always be me. I glanced at the fierce-looking robbers beside me and understood what was going on. It didn't matter to me who the members of the Wilson family chose. I wasn't the original host. Since I came to this world, I had never had any expectations of the members of the Wilson family. Looking at the surging tide of the sea, a bold impulse emerged in my long-dormant heart. The members of the Wilson family arrived faster than I had imagined. Lucy and I were being held hostage on a strange rocky beach. With a slight fall, behind us was the pitch-black sea water that could swallow a person up in an instant. William, with two big dark circles under his eyes, stood not far away and roared. You can have as much money as you want. Let Judy and Lucy go quickly, the robber said impatiently. Let both of them go. What hostages will I have then? You can only choose one to leave. For the remaining one, once the money arrives, I will naturally let her go. Lucy cried heart-wrenchingly, Mom, Dad, brother, save me. Cole's worried eyes turned back and forth between Lucy and me several times. Finally, he stammered and said, Sister Judy, did you hire these robbers, right? Stop making trouble. The sea is starting to rise, and it's dangerous to stand there. Come back quickly. If you come back, I'll forgive you for this nonsense. I rolled my eyes. The robber became even more impatient. Choose quickly, or I'll throw both of you into the sea. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson were already in a state of panic. After struggling for a long time, William finally said with difficulty, Let Lucy come over first. We'll raise the money for you right away. Don't hurt Judy. No one objected. Although there was a look of great reluctance and concern on each of their faces, I understood everyone's thoughts. They had invested too much in Lucy. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson had invested 18 years of financial and material resources to raise such a precious daughter. William had been a brother for 18 years, tenderly loving and taking care of his sister for thousands of days and nights. The carefully selected gifts he gave each year filled 3 rooms of different sizes, which were all expressions of his familial love. Although Simon knew that I was his savior, he and Lucy had been childhood sweethearts for more than 10 years, and the feelings he had invested were not all fake. Naturally, he couldn't bear to give them up all of a sudden. As for Cole, when he was in the orphanage, he was the one who always took behind me. Having been used to taking, how could he ever make a sacrifice for me? Only I, who had been abandoned from beginning to end. Had they not spent the slightest bit of energy, money, or resources on, the less they had invested, naturally, they wouldn't choose me at the critical moment. Lucy nodded slightly with satisfaction. Before leaving, she said triumphantly, Judy, I told you so. You'll never be able to compare to me. In everyone's heart, there will never be a place for you. I raised my eyebrows. Is that so? The sun was rising slowly, and a faint ray of light shone on the sea, breaking into clusters of dazzling golden fragments. Lucy was already crying in the arms of Mr. and Mrs. Wilson. William looked at me anxiously again and comforted me. Judy, the 30 million in cash will be raised soon. Don't be afraid. Your brother will definitely save you. Simon also chimed in beside him. Judy, don't worry. I will definitely marry you. After this, I promise to always choose you first in the future. However, my state of mind miraculously calmed down. I looked at everyone with a calm heart. I opened my mouth with a hoarse voice and said calmly, Don't waste the money. Everyone's faces froze. Since I had lived this life in place of the original host, before leaving, I might as well say a few words on her behalf. I turned to the parents of the Wilson family. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, you don't have to waste your money on an outsider like me. My name is Judy. The Wilson family doesn't like my existence, and similarly, I'm also very tired of the existence of the members of the Wilson family. During the year I lived in the Wilson family, I never framed Lucy out of jealousy. If you don't believe me, you can check all the surveillance cameras. William's face turned extremely pale, as if he had a premonition of something, and his eyes became more and more terrified. I then looked at Simon. Actually, I didn't have much of an impression of him. Even until today, I had only just remembered what he looked like. Your behavior of being a fence-sitter makes me sick. You don't love anyone, you only love yourself from beginning to end. Whoever's identity is beneficial to your future, your love will appear on that person. Simon lowered his head in shame and covered his face in pain. There was still one person left. As for you, what was Cole's full name again? Well, it doesn't matter what it is. Anyway, I don't remember you. There's nothing to say. Cole appeared too late. It had been more than a month since I transmigrated into this world, and he, who had been childhood sweethearts with the original host for 18 years, finally showed up. Before this, he had been silently by Lucy's side, caring about her joys and sorrows, and he didn't even realize that the person inside his sister Judy's shell had been replaced. Cole's legs went weak, and he almost fell to the ground. He kept muttering, "It's impossible, Sister Judy, how could you forget me, in the orphanage? You said you would protect me forever." It would be better to protect a dog than him. The tide behind me was rising extremely quickly. Large amounts of foam crashed against the cliff, leaving layers of water marks. Amidst everyone's screams, I suddenly turned around and jumped. My thin figure was like a falling meteor plunging into the surging waves. The sun finally broke through the shackles, and thousands of rays of light covered the boundless sea. When a large amount of sea water squeezed into my nose, mouth, and lungs, my brain, which had been in a chaotic and painful state, suddenly became clear. Scenes from the past flashed before my eyes like a movie, from the orphanage to the Wilson family. And from the Wilson family to being driven out of the house and wandering on the streets. I finally understood why I had never had any friends or family in the original world. That was a world I had imagined in my extreme pain, in a world that didn't exist. Naturally, no one would see me, and no one would pay attention to me. I was like a lonely soul, shuttling through the city, fantasizing about my ordinary life of walking alone. The book in my mind didn't exist at all. The words on it were all the reality I had experienced. The arrival of death shattered all the illusions. As the last mouthful of sea water poured into my lungs, I slowly closed my eyes. It turned out that, from beginning to end, I was Judy, the person disliked by everyone. Winnie's side story. After working overtime for more than a month in a row, I stretched wearily. All the cooperation between the Lincoln family and the Wilson family has been terminated. And the newly replaced suppliers need to be adjusted to each other again. When I drove to the Wilson family's villa to retrieve the terminated contract that I had left behind, I saw the members of the Wilson family arguing and fighting again. Mrs. Wilson, with her hair disheveled and a ferocious expression on her face, rushed in front of Mr. Wilson, and with a swipe of her hand, she left a bloody mark of 5 fingers. She kept scolding unyieldingly, "When you were a son-in-law who married into our family back then, how dare you have an illegitimate daughter with the nanny, and you even dared to swap the illegitimate daughter with my biological daughter, making me a fool for 19 years. I'm telling you, this debt will never be settled between us." That's when I remembered that it had spread throughout the social circle. A few months ago, Judy drowned herself in the sea, and even her body was never found. The despairing members of the Wilson family stayed by the seaside every day, waiting for a miracle to happen. Unfortunately, the miracle didn't come. Instead, the most dramatic thing arrived first. An anonymous paternity test report was handed to Mrs. Wilson. It was clearly written in black and white on it that Lucy and Mr. Wilson were actually biological father and daughter. Mrs. Wilson, who was extremely devastated, immediately investigated what had happened 19 years ago and then understood the whole story. Mr. Wilson was initially a son-in-law who married into the family, being suppressed everywhere. He had an affair with the young nanny in the house. The nanny accidentally got pregnant and gave birth on the same day as Mrs. Wilson. The words, son-in-law who married into the family, weighed on his head like a huge mountain, looking at the daughter born to the woman he loved. He had the idea of swapping the daughters. Since then, the illegitimate daughter became the biological daughter of him and Mrs. Wilson and was raised by their side. However, Mrs. Wilson's biological daughter, Judy, was thrown into an orphanage by him. In the chaotic Wilson family's villa, Mrs. Wilson was still fighting like a madwoman. "When June, you made our mother and daughter separated for 19 years. You heartless thing. My family shouldn't have accepted you into our family in the first place. I have already transferred all the shares of the one group to the board of directors. The little equity you hold has lost its say. Ha ha ha, even if it's a lose-lose situation, I won't make your remaining life easy, Judy, my poor daughter. What kind of sin did I commit in my life that I raised an illegitimate daughter for 19 years and ignored my own biological daughter? Mrs. Wilson had always held 40% of the shares and controlled the lifeline of the One Group. This time, she transferred all the shares to the hands of the competitors, and Mr. Wilson was kicked out of the board of directors on the same day. The Wilson family, like a huge mansion, collapsed overnight. As for William, I looked at him, who was sitting dully under the eaves. He had a stubbly beard and dark circles under his eyes. Obviously, he hadn't slept for a long time. He was tightly clutching a faded safety amulet in his hand. I heard that this safety amulet was a souvenir he casually bought. On the day Judy returned to the Wilson family, William gave this worthless thing to his biological sister by blood. This was the only gift he had ever given to Judy, a safety amulet worth $20. Judy had always worn it around her neck, treasuring it as always. But I didn't know what had happened, and the safety amulet was back in his hand, looking even more worn out. His status as the eldest young master of the Wilson family was no longer secure, and even the Wilson family's villa. I looked back at the acquisition intermediary and the new buyer. The Wilson family had completely collapsed, and they didn't even have the time to care about where they would live next. As for Lucy, I heard that she was closely clinging to Simon's side. However, the James family had originally relied on the Wilson family to survive. And now they were too busy to take care of themselves. How could they still be willing to have this fake wealthy daughter? The decline of the James family was even more ridiculous. Even so, Lucy could only cling tightly to Simon and not let go. That was her only choice and support. There was no place for her in the Wilson family. Although Mr. Wilson was her biological father, after all, he was a son-in-law who married into the family. Over the years, most of the Wilson family's property was in the hands of Mrs. Wilson. Mr. Wilson was just an empty shell. By chance, at a cocktail party, I met Simon in the next private room. Simon at that time no longer had his former high spirits. He humbly poured spicy white wine into his stomach and then humbly tried to please a small boss to get some orders. The small boss looked down on him and said frankly, "Simon, let me tell you the truth, now that the Wilson family has fallen, the Lincoln family is the dominant one. Everyone knows that Miss Judy saved the daughter of the Lynn Group in the gold store. Now that the Lincoln family has spoken, who dares to give you orders? Alas, it would have been great if you had married Miss Judy. I heard that Miss Judy is infatuated with you." Simon left the private room in a state of despair. On the misty street in the autumn rain, he had a fierce argument with Lucy, who came to look for him. "It's all your fault. An illegitimate child who can't show up in public. If I had married Judy, I wouldn't have ended up in this situation." Lucy refused to let it go and fought with him. "We were clearly already engaged. Your parents keep speaking sarcastically to me every day now, and you also use the excuse of doing business to not come home for 3 or 5 days. I'm telling you, there's no way the James family can get rid of me." I remember that the last time I saw Lucy, she was still like a delicate little white flower hiding behind the crowd, while Judy, standing on the reef not far away, was as straight and tall as a cedar. It had only been a few months, and the elegance on Lucy had disappeared. She had become a complete crazy shrew. But I think, no matter how crazy she is, she's not as crazy as Cole. Cole dropped out of school. When Judy returned to the Wilson family to claim kinship, she excitedly held his hand and said, "Cole, my biological parents are very rich. When I return to the Wilson family, I'll borrow money from them to pay for your college tuition." Unfortunately, Judy only managed to raise the tuition for Cole's first year of college. And then she was buried in the sea. Cole, who had always been protected by Judy, suddenly realized that without his beloved sister Judy, he couldn't even continue his studies. There was no one to shield him from the wind and rain anymore. Cole, who had been beaten by society, chose to drop out of school and could only do some physical labor to cover his expenses. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, I went to pay my respects at the cenotaph of Judy in the cemetery, from a distance. I saw Cole kneeling in front of Judy's tombstone. He was crying bitterly, slapping himself continuously, and choking as he stroked the small black and white photo on the tombstone. "Sister Judy, I was wrong. Please come back and take a look at me, okay? Just come to me in my dream and take a look at me." Now I realized that in the days without anyone to shield me from the wind and rain, I have to fight and strive to get even a little bit of resources. Sister Judy, don't forget me. Please don't forget me, we clearly knew each other the longest. Why did you forget me in the end? You remembered William, you remembered Simon, why did you forget me? He was sobbing uncontrollably. I just felt disgusted. Yes, they had known each other for 18 years. How could Cole so easily abandon Judy and instead be attracted to Lucy? I rubbed my head. I think that after seeing so many messy things, it has had a great impact on my psychology. I need a psychologist to comfort my wounded heart. The appointed psychologist sat in front of me and drank a glass of juice. She was very young but was a newly emerging famous psychologist. I stirred the coffee that was steaming with mist. Miss Sunny, don't you like coffee? She shook her head. I didn't have a good childhood and have never been able to get used to that stuff. I skipped class to come here today. Ms. Winnie, if you have any questions, ask them quickly. Tisk. Who would have thought that the budding psychologist was just a sophomore student? I stared at her beautiful eyebrows and eyes and said in a low voice, I've watched a lot of plays recently and have some questions that I don't understand. For example, who sent that anonymous paternity test report to Mrs. Wilson, and how could this person be sure that there was a relationship between Lucy and Mr. Wilson? Sunny poured another glass of juice. It's not difficult, generally speaking. If a father finds out that the daughter he has raised for 18 years is not his biological child, he is usually more eager than the mother to swap her back, because the father doesn't have the pain of pregnancy and the energy spent on raising the child, and he is more willing to cut his losses. But Mr. Wilson clearly disliked the return of his biological daughter more than Mrs. Wilson. Then it can only mean that the relationship between Mr. Wilson and the adopted daughter is not ordinary. I nodded slightly, but I don't quite understand why the biological daughter had to jump into the sea in the end. Wouldn't it be better to just solve the mystery directly? Sunny stuck out her tongue and smiled. If the mystery was solved without much impact, the Wilson family would most likely still exist, only when the biological daughter was gone, under the strong impact of regret. Would Mrs. Wilson choose to fight Mr. Wilson to the death and bring down the Wilson family? Besides, such a home isn't worth going back to anyway. I nodded again and took a sip of coffee. Then, in the gold store back then, did that biological daughter really want to save me sincerely, or did she want to get the status of a savior and ask me to help her escape by faking her death in the final waves? Sunny was obviously taken aback. After a long while, she apologized with a smile and lowered her head, half true and half false. That biological daughter just recognized that the person in the gold store was the eldest daughter of the Lincoln family, so she desperately wanted to seize an opportunity. Fortunately, she succeeded. I grabbed her hand. Judy, if that knife had been a little more off target back then, you would have lost your life. She explained seriously. I know, I'm always very careful. Life is precious, and death is not the ultimate solution. Death is just a way for the weak and useless to fight back. And it can't arouse any remorse in the strong at all. I don't believe that they will have a change of heart if I die. I only know that the one who can save me from the depths of trouble is myself. I went up and hugged her. Judy's new life was going very well, thousands of miles away from the Wilson family. She was majoring in psychology at school, and the haze that had previously shrouded her had dissipated. This was her new life that she had struggled to climb out of the quagmire through countless days and nights. Your new name is very nice, I praised sincerely. A comfortable smile appeared on the corner of Judy's mouth. I am originally Sunny, born through breaking the clouds. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.